How do we become aware? The paradigm of complexity states that we learn through the subject-object relationship, where the subject takes and internalizes the image caught by the object, several times through repetition until the image is set, projecting and later practicing what is learned. From where do we become aware? Our awareness occurs from the scientific explanation of semantic, epistemic categories derived from a vast approach which intends to let us know reality through a specific method. In the world of the complex, all explanations have a place, their own rationality, but they are not hegemonic owners of the truth that underlies in the outside environment and the truths we try to reveal about ourselves. The purpose of the scientific method is to find recurrence. This is not necessarily the absolute truth, since truth obeys a system of representations. Ergo, the truth is not absolute. It is conceived as relative as it obeys particular interest in a precise moment, using a strategy from that specific moment. Based on this, it can be noted that the consciousness of the world is represented in the consciousness of the group, as a present awareness in the emerging society where the subject is a constructor as well as being constructed. The subject is observed from a structural point of view, considering what surrounds it, and mostly being conscious of a role it has to play in its environment. In these circumstances, it is necessary to relate the individual consciousness to the world we cope with and are immersed in, where the social entities represent the individual's constructs, and it becomes the collective consciousness. Our identity is a product of our perceptive structure. When the learning process occurs and consciousness about what surrounds it arises, it results in a reflection process. To be able to define and understand knowledge, we should indefectibly reconsider the established relationship between the subject and the object as a known and about to know entity. The more aware the subject is, the more is known. By internalizing all of those images of its environment, it achieves to set in its subconsciousness through the reiterated repetition of what is seen. It notices through the vision of an image and builds or carries out a brain processing of a situation. Therefore, the perceptions are no more than the system's constructions of the subject's processing. Once the subject achieves awareness of its existence, evoking it knows, but also being conscious of what it is left to know, it increasingly establishes new relationships with the object that surround it. It is aware that it is not alone, but also that there exist other affinities with common backgrounds. The subject is not alone in an unknown world. It is part of a network of social relationship. It is part of a specific society, an emerging one where moral codes, beliefs, and even values determine its behavior in that community. It is from that multicultural society that it is part of a collective consciousness. Language and communication. As mentioned previously, language is one of the main elements that have helped the socialization of the subject in the culture and the development of its linguistic skills. Language and communication are two indivisible concepts, particularly when we refer to social relationships, as well as perturbations and fluctuations which within the language have inferred in the development of the human being throughout the entire history of society. Throughout history, those paradigms which society has been developed upon have been changing. Thus, the relationship between man and society is traversed by language. The changes language endured, the consequences carried in its social interrelation, and its mental disposition as an interacting subject related to it. The subjects, viewers, are social actors in communication while they gain consciousness of their language process as a forming reality of society. As we have been referring to communication in the paradigm of complexity, we intend to exceed the classic and mechanical ideas emphasizing on nonlineal processes, but multi-casual, random, and eventful ones. From this perspective, the evolution of communicative interaction is not linear, static, or fixed. On the contrary, communication is varying, polysemic, multivocal, and of great interdynamic nuances. In other words, it is a complex which we call process of communicative interaction. Language and communication enable the emergence of a social subject, while cultural, the subject is a consequence of it and is determined by the dynamics of a symbolic register which enables the subject to link with the communication discursively, thinking it, feeling it, giving it a purpose, and where at the same time the subject configures the social places from where it interacts. Integrating multiple variables of a communicative dynamic is to talk about society and its culture, subject and its language, self-poetic systems and their complexity, networks and patterns that are put together, groups. To sum up, is to talk about the communicative process. Speaking of complex communication implies resizing the concept of communication and its relationship with the paradigm of complexity. In order to do so, we must first approach what we understand as a complex experience. Marin says, it is then crucial to elucidate when, from the order of the experience, an experience is complex. It is complex whenever discourses about complexity can be taken to the experience field, and this helps to its comprehension. It means to conduct a dialectic comparison between this experience and those dissertations we can build about it, praxeology. That said, being able to formalize them is to apply all knowledge gained through these means to the dimension where they emerge. This is our duty. From this perspective, it is not enough being actors of the experiences we build from those relationships that set our spaces of interactions. It is necessary to move from actors to observers. Observers are unlike actors. They are conscious of their process of relating. They reshape their experience, signifying it with multiple meanings, heuristics. This transition, moving from actor to observer, enables a different formalization of the daily life and through it, a possible understanding about communicative interaction and social processes. That said, let's describe what we understand for communication in this context. Communication is an interdynamic emergence of exchanging mediated signals through physical stimulus and channels of reciprocate affectation among peers. Communication should take a special kind of symbolic essence to the introduction of discursive events, which works as a medium for an emergence when the two or more people or groups use it as a tool of understanding. This process is based on language and to us in the discursive dialect. Traditionally, communication from the disjunction, reduction, has been understood as a lineal process of emission-reception of messages, information that, through an encoder-decoder, travels towards a receptor-decoder, like Shannon's communication model. This concept from a major cybernetics is left behind to conceive communication as the interpretation of a system of shared meaning interactions, where fluctuations and disturbances specific to the system set the course of action and meaning in regards to communication. In the former cybernetics, communication was a lineal concept that from feedback links information and its movements as processes that in this case subvert the subject, locking it out of its own process, while the communicative interaction seconds the subject from its complexus, built up as jointly. Complex communication is a dialectic perspective of investigation which enables thinking about society and language, processes from complexity, from what was interweaved jointly, discursive plot, from the emergence of an agent who acts as an active observer in the making and communicative interaction. It is an area of work, study, and investigation relatively uncharted in our field. It needs new interactions so that actors, observers of this process are able to design, analyze, and intervene realities in the field of investigation of social processes. So, when analyzing, they have a fundamental goal, which is to learn and interact with their environment from the essence of communication processes. As Ciarana mentions, accepting an uncertainty which is impossible to eliminate is one of the greatest challenges of complex thought because it obliges us to develop cognitive strategies increasingly critical and self-critical. It pushes us to create new methods in the process of establishing new directions, that as individuals, we have to contribute to society if we do not desire to end up in routine or predetermined and programmed actions. In programmed situations, individuals become null by society as if were an entity falling onto them like a concrete slab, ruling them in every single way. Communicative interaction. Communicative interaction is a process of recursive and discursive organization among subjects who are part of the language in a process of constant reciprocal affectation. The interaction is a discursive pattern which enables the subject to socialize through its dynamic actions. Meanwhile, it imbricates meanings to its experience of being subjects of the language. Interacting is to give shape to communicative action networks. In other words, it is enacting the language through the discursive action, being observers but not actors. To some extent, the interaction and communication in a network re-signifying one to the other through the action and reflection of subjects in a same network. To some extent, networks are relationships which form the imaginary shape of networks. A network or a group of relationships are not a random event. Because they are networks, they are weaved. In order to exist, they have to be contracted. But who weaves networks? There's no other possible answer than the actors. As a result, the web is not independent to the builders. That is to say, in a network construction, there is not a prearranged plan or a logic to be followed, but it is the actors, while interacting, who make it happen. The social web, formed by the communicative interactions, allow the continuous movement of each of the networks that will come. When a network is built, it doesn't lack logic. This logic is not external to the web, but rather while it is developed, logic takes place in itself, which makes the actors interact among each other. The network sets up a space, systemic, which is more than its own existence as a network, a discursive, symbolic, point of cultural, social, and political self-regulation. Disturbances of the communicative interaction. We should understand by disturbances as those actions performed by the dynamic environment of the regarding system which motivates it, fostering and generating within itself actions of change and transformation. These changes can be either destructive, breaking the organization of the system, or productive, allowing the emergence of new relationships. The perturbances enable the existence of the communicative interaction provided that they are random functions to the dynamics of the communication itself. The action exerted from the outside of the system implies perturbances related to the process which generates new interactions in the same system-environment relationship. The environment and the system are defined by the same concept, but under different functional perspectives.